Hello there, Mr. Salas here. Right, so English video time. It's been a while, but I thought it was time to actually make a video in English with obviously English subtitles so we can actually apply the comprehensible input while we are trying to learn something new as well. That's what the Plática, Tópica videos are all about. So let's start with them. Today, I'm going to talk about something that I have been really involved in this whole channel and in my life as an English teacher as well, which is like language learning and language teaching as well. So I would like to tell you how to learn any language, like any language you decide. The only problem that we might have is with the languages that do not use the Latin alphabet. Those require an extra step, but I'll tell you in a minute. Right, so anyway, let's get to it. To learn any language, first of all, you need to know what you want to do. Like, and this might sound like a little weird, but you need to have some sort of goal in mind. Just do not say, oh, I want to learn Spanish. I want to learn German. Try to give yourself like goals, small goals that would go a long way. Like if you actually have a goal of, okay, I would like to be able to talk to a person in German, that goal, even if you have one goal, it might be too much at the beginning, and depending on who you are, it might not be the best idea. Why? Well, if you're just trying to achieve that, I mean, talking to a person, like back and forth, that will probably take a while. So if you're a little desperate for, I don't know, like seeing something, like having an outcome, a really soon outcome, I would say that's not the best idea. So rather than doing that or thinking that and setting that as your goal, I would probably go with something a little bit more on the easy side. For instance, let's say you want to learn Spanish, and your goal, like your actual goal, is to be able to talk to a person in Spanish, for example. Try to think something that involves talking to a person, but it's probably not a whole full-fledged conversation, but rather like something a little easier. For instance, let's say, oh, I would like to be able to order food, and the waiter actually understanding what I'm ordering. All right, I think that's easier to do and probably achievable in like a couple of weeks maybe. So that it's a much better goal than actually trying to just say, oh, you know what, I'm going to learn how to talk to a person in Spanish. I mean, that's gonna take a while. Another goal you could have is like just saying, you know what, I like to be able to read Spanish, like to read off a script. So these goals, even though they are smaller, I think they would be much better in the long run, because you will have something to show for it. Because if your goal is so broad, like oh, I like to talk to a person, I mean, how do you define that? Like oh, talking to a person, you could probably just memorize something, go to a person and say, hola, ¿cómo estás? And then say, bien, ¿y tú? Bien. Well, there you go. You're talking to a person, but that's probably not what you meant. So you have to be really specific in your goals, and you have to set them up from the get-go. But at the same time, try to have small goals that will lead to a long way in a long-term learning. That's the goal here, in my opinion. At least that's what I do. This happened to me with Portuguese. I tried to learn Portuguese. I'm not particularly interested or invested in Portuguese, to be honest. So that was a problem from the get-go. I did want to learn Portuguese, and my goal was just to be able to talk Portuguese. So my goal was really broad. I didn't like the language, so that just led to me not actually learning and abandoning the language, which is something that could happen as well. So try to be really specific in your goals and try to have like some sort of step-by-step process. Right, next, how do you actually learn the language now? Because I think, sorry if I spent so much time on the goal, it's just like that is the most important thing, first of all, because that will decide whether you're going to abandon it or not, whether you will feel like you're not making progress or something, and that's key. Now, what do you do? Well, I like to apply something called comprehensible input. You probably have heard of it before if you're involved with the language community here on YouTube or on the internet. But if you haven't, let me just tell you, it's basically how you learned your native language when you were a baby or a little child. That's how you learn the language, by being completely exposed to it. all the time, you know, basically like when you were little, you heard your parents talk, you saw a person ordering food or something, you saw someone on the street talking to another person, your aunts visited you and they talked to you even though you probably couldn't make out what they were saying. So all of this is like basically input you're receiving of the language, and eventually your brain basically connects the dots and makes you actually learn that language. That's basically what the comprehensible input is. That's a really summarized version of it, but still, it's just, let me just tell you what to do. I don't want to be that academic in this video. I just want to tell you exactly what to do. So first of all, what I recommend, it's actually choosing a TV show. Could be on Netflix, could be on YouTube, on Prime Video, whatever. Really just choose your platform. And you're going to watch that video or that series, movie, whatever, in your target language with subtitles in that target language as well. So they have to be, like, for instance, if you're learning Spanish, you would hear Spanish audio with Spanish subtitles, right? It is really important that this series, it's a Spanish original series, because if it's not, you will find that the subtitles do not match with the audio, and that will create a problem. So that's what I would do. All right, so remember, so if you're learning German or Spanish, for instance, then you will have to search for a series that is in Spanish or in German with subtitles in those languages, basically. Now, what happens if you are actually trying to learn a language that doesn't use the Latin alphabet? For instance, let's say either Greek or Japanese, Mandarin, etc. If you're trying to learn any of these languages, so I cannot tell you much about Mandarin. I think that's a whole universe on its own. It requires a video for it. But for Japanese, for instance, what I did, I actually learned all these little syllables, the hiragana and katakana. So basically, it's the way Japanese is written usually. I didn't learn the kanji, just those two systems. And with that, I was able to make out a couple more words when I was watching. Some kanji, I think it's really important to know between 100 and 500 kanji to be able to watch a TV show. Apart from that, I mean, that's the only bad part of those languages. You actually require extra work before you actually start using the comprehensible input method. Now, it is entirely possible that you just learn the language just by listening to people and even a series or something. You don't actually have to be able to read it. Just by listening to it, eventually you get it. But I think it is much better when you're actually reading the language as well, because you get to learn also the way it's written. For Japanese, Mandarin, and these languages, it's a little bit more complicated. But I would still use the same method, and it's actually what I do right now. I am playing video games in Japanese, even though I'm understanding like probably 30% of it. I get by. It's a video game. It's actually very very simple to grab and play. With the series, Japanese series are so overacted. It is really easy to get like what they're saying. If you're watching anime, it's the same thing. It's even more overacted, right? So I think it's really easy to do it in those languages as well. It just requires a little bit more patience. Now, also remember, I'm setting my goals really low first. So for Japanese, I wanted to, for instance, when I was watching a TV show, okay, my goal was every time someone says I, you, or he, or she, I want to be able to understand that they are saying that word.
私
僕
俺
And it worked, and I did it, and it was really easy. So that's a really, really low goal that you can probably achieve in like 1 or 2 days. And that kept me going, and then I just moved the goalpost. Like, okay, now I'll try to understand when they're saying, I like something, or I'm hungry. Let's say if I can spot the hungry word in this. So anyway, that's basically what I mean by setting a goal, and it depends on you and you alone. That's the difficult part, I think, that nobody else will tell you what to do. Now, apart from watching series and movies, what else can you do? Well, when I'm learning languages, I don't like to just be like receiving the language passively, even though that helps and it would actually give me the language eventually. I like to do something a little bit more active. When I say something a little bit more active, I mean that I would like to study. However, studying grammar and vocabulary lists and all this stuff doesn't really work unless you're trying to like get a, I don't know, like a certification in that language. So what I actually try to do is use literally any app or platform to study. So for instance, for Japanese, I use two. One of them is BUSUU. I like to use BUSUU from time to time just to practice, what I'm learning is like, a little, yeah, it is really grammar and translation based, but it's just like me doing something apart from just receiving the language passively. And the other one, it's animelon.com. It's basically a website where you can watch anime. This is not really active because I'm watching a series, but it is kind of active because I sometimes I pause the video, but it's basically a website where they have this anime series, and you can actually watch the anime with the subtitles in Japanese. And if you pause the video or the series, you can actually click on the individual kanji and you can see what they mean. So sometimes when I understand that, they said this word, I have no idea what the kanji is like, I pause the video, I probably go back for like 5 seconds and I check the meaning of that kanji in particular. I don't like to write down anything. I prefer to just be able to identify it, but that's my thing. Like some people would like to actually try to write the kanji down so they remember it later. I think that if a word or a kanji or whatever, it's really important, it will show up eventually again. So I think it's not necessary to actually write down anything. Now, apart from these two platforms, I like to use Assimil. However, Assimil, I don't use it with Japanese because I think the Japanese version is not very good. It relies a lot on Romaji, which is basically Romanized Japanese, and I don't like it. I like to experience the language in the language, right? So this Romanized version, it's not really useful unless you only want to speak. So what I like to do with Assimil though, it's in every other language that I'm trying to learn. So for instance, I'm also learning German. Every day I'm learning German. I consume media in German. So with Assimil, basically what I do, it's after receiving all the input for the day in German, my video games are in German for instance, I go to Assimil and I do 1 or 2 lessons. It really depends on my mood. Sometimes I don't do anything. You have to like it, right? And when I'm doing the Assimil thing, I just spend like 25 minutes per day, if anything, maybe like 30 minutes at most. And that's basically what I do. If you don't know what Assimil is, it's basically, I have a video here, I'll leave the video here, sorry, it's in Spanish, where I actually teach you how to use Assimil for learning a language. I don't recommend Assimil for learning the language per se, but actually just to learn how the language sounds like and how you're supposed to pronounce it. That's really good for this technique called shadowing. More of that in that video. But finally, what I'd like to say is that you have to like it. You have to like the process. You have to enjoy it. If you're just learning because you have to, I'm afraid you might never actually finish liking it. Perdón, es que estaba jugando WoW. So if you don't like the process or what you're doing, you will end up abandoning it. Believe me, I have done it before. And that's the biggest problem, I think. Now, why is this not at the beginning of the video? Because I think people who already left the video have no interest in learning a language, really. But if you have the interest, if you have reached this point, then that means you're really interested in learning a language, and I commend you for it. So what you should do now is thinking about, all right, eventually you will lose motivation. Eventually you'll feel like you don't want to do something that day. Eventually you'll feel like you're not progressing. So when you feel that, just remember that's normal and just keep going. Or take a break. I take breaks all the time. Like maybe I study for 2 days straight, and then on the 3rd day I prefer just to watch a movie in my language, in Spanish maybe. Just to relax a little, you don't have to study every day, especially if you don't have the the need for the language immediately. So just like the language and just like the method. If you're doing something and you're not liking it, stop. Just my 2 cents. Right, guys? So I hope you liked the video, and this was another video in English, so you can. People stop telling me how I never speak English in my videos, in my channel, saying some of you actually say I don't speak the language. What are you on about? I have like 10 videos of me speaking English on this channel. Hopefully this will be enough to prove that I actually speak the language. Thank you very much.